are, revving out the Integra. There you go, VTEC. Welcome to Drive Culture. I'm Jonathan Rivers, and today we have a very special car for you. It's a 2000 Acura Integra GS-R. And I'm going to tell you why this was one of the best sport compacts on the market when it launched. So we'll go over the exterior, the interior, the powertrain, and of course, take it for a drive. So if this is content you're after or you're new to the channel, please be sure to click that bell to subscribe to come back for more. And with that, let's get after it. So let's talk about the Acura Integra, right? Now, this car here, being a 2000 model year vehicle, means that as of right now, it's 24 years old. So I'm dating myself here, but this was the car, right? This was the car that anybody my age, right, growing up in high school and college, if you had one of these, you were the man. People knew instantly what this car meant and instantly knew the performance that it offered. Now, of course, it's not a Type R, right? That's a totally different category of vehicle, but it was always the GS-R that was affordable, still offered great performance, and that iconic Integra styling in the late 90s and early 2000s. Now, we're really lucky to have this car. This is actually a private owner vehicle. The owner is actually the original owner of this car. Now, we're here in Southern California, but this vehicle was actually bought in Michigan, and it survived its whole life and now is out here in sunny California. But the connection to Michigan's real. So that's where I'm from. That's where I grew up. And actually, the first car that I learned to drive a manual transmission on was a 1998 Acura Integra GS-R. That was my cousin's car. Can't believe to this day that he actually let me drive it, but you're gonna see why later, once we get behind the wheel in the drive section, why this was and maybe still is one of the best manual shifting vehicles on the market. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into the exterior of this Integra GS-R. Now, for you Acura fanboys out there and the people that love the Integra, let's talk about the body style. So this one here is the 3-door liftback. And of course, you know, when the new Integra launched a couple years ago, there was people that said, no, it has to be a coupe. Well, you're right, it did launch as a coupe in this generation, but there was actually a 4-door sedan available as well, for those that forget. But that aside, it was definitely this 3-door liftback that caught all of the attention and really captured the hearts of the youth of that time. And part of it was its design, because it really looked like nothing else on the road. So this DC2 generation of Integra is really known for its headlight design. Those 4 round headlights are still iconic today. And what's cool is that they were actually a US specific design. So this car was also sold in Japan as a Honda Integra, and it had these long rectangular headlights. Now, admittedly, there's some people that love the JDM style of things, and they might even prefer that old Japanese front fascia and headlight design, but it was these 4 iconic round headlights that instantly made you know what you were looking at back in the day. Now, beyond that, you got the awesome Acura caliper up on the front. And to this day, what really made this vehicle special was the fact that they embossed the name Integra into both the front and rear fascia, which again, you guys might know with the new latest gen Integra, they actually did the same thing, harkening back to this 3rd generation of Acura Integra. Now, the other thing here is this car, right? It's a red, it looks really good. And admittedly, this is the original owner, they drive it. This particular car has over 137,000 miles to it, which again, considering it's 24 years old, is not that bad, but it's obviously got some wear and tear on it because they do drive this vehicle. But what I can say is that they've done a complete overhaul on this vehicle, fixing things like all the seals, the bushings, gaskets, did a complete overhaul on the engine and suspension to try to make it as stock and as original as possible. So I totally appreciate that. But again, you got that awesome front fascia, the orange, you know, lights down below. Again, kind of total 90s JDM style. But let's make our way to the side of the vehicle. You can take in the entire profile, right? So here's where you really get to see that three-door liftback body style, that coupe body that, again, is still highly desirable in today's market. This car still looks really, really good today. But let's go right into it. So with it being the GSR, it did get some performance upgrades over the standard GS and LS models. Now, the GSR actually got these 15-inch wheels, which, again, by today's standard are tiny, right? I don't think there's any cars that come with 15-inch wheels anymore, right? And the fact that cars in this segment now come with 19s and 20-inch wheels is really ridiculous. But these are the original wheels, and boy, are they polished and cleaned up, right? They look fantastic. There's got, disc brakes back there. The suspension was tweaked for GSR duty. And again, it just was like a nice step up, not going all in on, Type R levels of performance, but giving you great daily drivability in this package. So a really, really good wheel and tire package here. Now, these aren't the original tires, right? Again, given the fact that the vehicle is 24 years old, but it is the right spec. So again, that was one of the things, was they wanted to get the right wheel and tire size to make it feel as truly OEM as possible. But as we make our way along the side, you'll see back then, right, body side molding was a thing. Not that you can't get it today, but it just was a really clean, singular piece that went through the door, carried on to the rear fender. And again, I think as we make our way to the rear of the vehicle, this, I think, just as much as the front, is so iconic and instantly recognizable as the Integra. So first and foremost, you got those long tail lights, right? Total 90s, look awesome, right? Really, really show you, how wide the vehicle was for its time. But a couple other things, right? Let's date back here to 2000, right? So notice how not only is there an Acura caliper there in the center, there's actually the name Acura spelled out there on the left as well. Acura doesn't do that anymore, right? Because part of it was, even back then, the brand was less than 2 decades old, right? And so they were still trying to make sure people knew what that caliper stood for and what the name of these vehicles were. This was only the third generation of Integra at that time. But also, how cool is it, right? Being the liftback design, you've got that little space in there under the Acura caliper to put your hand in to lift up the liftback. That was a great usability feature. You do have the locking mechanism below, right? There's no electronic locks back in 2000, right? So this car is, appropriate for the time, but very bare bones by today's standard. Now, also under the right tail light, how cool is you got that DOHC VTEC badging, right? Because VTEC kicked in, and we're gonna totally try that out when we go through the driver view of this car. And then just due south of that, you got the Integra, again, embossed into that rear fascia, and that large, aggressive, single exhaust outlet down below. Last thing, these are some really geeky things, but I just love, this generation had a rear window wiper, which looks and feels totally 90s and 2000s, but even more so than that, I mean, the antenna off to the left, right? Do you remember those little metal rods that stuck out of the cars? I mean, we all have shark fins these days, or they're neatly integrated into the roof or the body, sometimes even into the glass. So the fact that we were using metal rods back in the day really shows the progress we've made. So with that, I think we've covered all the awesome exterior details of this Integra GS-R. So next, let's go ahead and hop inside to talk about the interior. All right, here we are inside the interior of the Integra GS-R. Now, again, this is a retro review here, right? So we're really just gonna point out some of the features it have and what really makes it different, compared to modern day cars. And I think first and foremost, it's the second you get in, it's the simplicity of everything, right? Modern vehicles, right? Again, this is almost 3 decades old now. They've just gotten so complex. There's so much technology, safety, features, audio, all these screens, right? There's all these things inside the vehicle that, obviously we've got accustomed to it after all these years, but you really feel like you're launching off for NASA every morning. You're pushing all these buttons, hitting these switches, setting your things are getting connected. You got none of that here, right? You literally get in And you take the key, right? So the key is fantastic, right? It's an actual key, metal key. It does have the Acura caliper in red, which is a nice little touch for a GSR. And literally you would insert the key and roll it forward to go. It's as simple as that. Now, one of the other things is the steering wheel. Even back then, they were using great diameter steering wheels, knowing that this was a driver's car. It did have an Acura symbol, but it's not like a chrome badge like you'll find on a lot of modern Acuras. There's 2 buttons here for the horns on the car, and then there's just 2 buttons here for cruise control, which is actually engaged by a button that's spelled out and says cruise up here on the dash. The only other button on the dash is actually a brightness for your gauges, right? So again, simplicity is the name of the game. Now you got vents across the front. They are adjustable, still high quality, very, very low cowl, right? It's very, very good visibility, super thin A-pillars. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go for a drive, but here in this center stack, again, all the HVAC buttons are very simple. They're singular buttons, right? There's obviously no auto climate back in the day. And then this particular car even has the upgraded Acura radio with a CD player, right? So no, there's no tape deck in here, although that would have been cool. But this harkens back to the days. This is a double DIN, right? For those that remember audio setup, but it's actually a single DIN radio with a pocket down below. You've got this other little ashtray here, cigarette lighter, and you got cup holders that pop out. But again, simplicity is the name of the game. You got a very small armrest with a very small center console, traditional glove box there. This car does get a power moonroof, which is nice. It even has a shade, so that's kind of cool. But also, I mean, it's just really, really simple, even when you look forward at the gauges. They're a very, very clean design, and I think a lot of modern vehicles could learn from this because this is such an easy typeface, and boy, does it just look classic in its design. As we look to the door, pretty basic functions here. There was only a 6-speaker audio system on this GSR system, so nothing to probably write home about, but still really good audio for the day. You do have basic door and mirror controls here as well. The seats are really comfortable and supportive, very aggressive side bolstering. They are leather on GSR, so they're cloth on the lower trims. They became leather on GSR. Kind of cool too, because like the headrests are these big holes, and that's kind of a late 80s, 90s design trend, I believe. In the back, you do have little bucket seats back there. We can quickly hop in. It's hot out today, but we'll hop in and show you how much space is back there. But overall, super simplistic. And last but not least, being a GSR, we have a 5-speed manual transmission. So of course, we'll talk about this as we go for the drive, but next, let's quickly talk about the rear seat. All right, guys, here we are in the second row of the Integra GSR, and it's a pretty tight spot. I mean, again, this is a 3-door, right? It is a coupe, so you're only gonna, back in the day, bring your just a couple small friends, right? Because this is a 4-passenger vehicle too, right? So you do have this big space here in the middle, this plastic cubby to store stuff. But I mean, there's really not even like headrest back here, right? I mean, there's a little hump, but there's nothing that would actually cover an adult's head back here. They do split and fold down, which is interesting, but other than that, you've got some speakers back here, places to hold your arms, and even a little hook for maybe your dry cleaning if this is like your first premium vehicle. But with that, let's go ahead and check out the cargo space. All right, next, let's go ahead and talk about the cargo space of the Integra GSR. So as I mentioned in the exterior walk around, even back then, I think Acura was really smart. They created this little like cubby here where you could put your hand in to easily lift up this rear area here. But there is this kind of like little lever or switch, and you pull it, and then it basically automatically lifts up. It is on struts, so it just stays up, which is nice too. But admittedly, this piece is actually pretty heavy. It's pretty, it's much different than the modern hatchbacks, which is actually pretty light and they shoot right up. So, but what you'll realize is you actually have pretty good space back here. You even have this like cargo cover that's felted as well. So that's a nice kind of premium touch. But the cubic feet back here was 13.3 cubic feet of space, which for its time was actually quite competitive in its segment, especially amongst these sport compacts. So pretty good space back here. Obviously, the newer cars have even more cargo capacity due to good packaging, but for its time, this was very competitive. So next, let's go ahead and talk about the powertrain. All right, guys, next, let's talk about the powertrain of this 2000 Integra GS-R. Now, at the time, it was all about this engine. This alone was enough reason for someone to go out and buy this car, because not only was this engine bulletproof, as the fact that this car is now 24 years old and still running strong, um, the fact that it was very moddable, right? There was a lot of people that would go out and throw intakes, exhausts, headers, turbochargers, superchargers, you name it. There was all kinds of modding that went into this platform. And it was all because of this. This was a 1.8 liter. This was Acura's B18C1 engine, right? And in the GS-R spec, it made 170 horsepower and 128 pound-feet of torque, made it to that slick shifting 5-speed manual transmission. And yes, it only came in front-wheel drive. And boy, was this really the car that changed the sport compact segment. But there's no better way than to prove that out than to get behind the wheel. So next, let's go ahead and take this thing for a drive. All right, guys, here we are in the 2000 Acura Integra GS-R. And we're gonna go ahead and take this thing for a drive. So gonna go ahead and grab my seat belt, right? So, you know, the crazy thing about this whole experience for me is, like I said, I mean, this car, model year different, but I mean, this is essentially the same car that I learned to drive a manual transmission on. So we're gonna see if I'm any good still, all right? So here we go. So, you know, got the traditional key inserted, clutch in, give it a twist, it's a neutral, all good. And it's a super hot day, so we're gonna have the AC on. So, you know, given that it's an old car, you might even hear that AC compressor kind of moving there in the background. But that aside, I'm really excited to take this thing for a drive. So go ahead, put the parking brake, there's reverse. Again, apparently the owner of this car has never replaced the clutch. Now, there's 137,000 miles on this vehicle. Most of the components, like the major components, are still OEM original, but you know, he did do a complete overhaul in this car, trying to, you know, bring it to as close to the original OEM spec as possible. So he had, you know, a mechanic go through this car over a couple month period of time to basically refurbish everything, change out any gaskets, bushing, seals. Everything was replaced, and just trying to, again, bring back that original you know, feeling. And I can tell you right off the bat that, like, again, it's been a long time since I've driven one of these cars, but it's amazing. It feels like it's like I remember 20 years ago, right? So we'll go ahead and, you know, slowly start to rev it out. But yeah, I mean, there's just something to be said about, you know, driving these older cars from the late 90s and the 2000s. I mean, one of the things about it is you realize how low to the ground you were. I mean, to get to this height in today's market, I feel like you have to be in a supercar. Like, I feel like I'm super low to the ground. I got a super low, like, hood and cowl, great visibility all around. I mean, a lot of that, to be fair, was, you know, these cars don't have all the, you know, safety and airbags and pedestrian protection that the newer vehicles have, which have changed their styling, right? It's made the industry, you know, have all these strict regulations in place where now the hood designs have to be much higher. You have to protect for pedestrians. The vehicles are going to be heavier because you have to add in all this safety equipment. And not only safety equipment, right? Everybody that's asking for new features, premium audio systems, which I'm guilty of as well, all that stuff is extra weight. And it's amazing to think that this car weighs like 2,700 pounds. I mean, we'll put the number down below, but it just is super light by today's standards. You know, in fact, my own, you know, Integra Type S, you know, it weighs just a little over 3,200 pounds. So, I mean, to think that there's like a 500-600 pound difference between the two cars. Now, keep in mind, my car is a 5-door liftback. It's got the extra doors, so I mean, obviously it's not an apples to apples comparison, but just against a newer car, this car still is super lightweight. And yeah, the transmission, the gearing, everything still feels really good. It's pretty easy to heel and tow in this. There's definitely no rev matching or anything like that. It's a lot of fun to drive. So I'm gonna go ahead and not get into it too much here, but let's just rev it out a little bit. So first gear, yeah, it's got good pull. But again, what you realize is, man, these naturally aspirated engines, they need to be revved out. But it revs out, and I mean, even on the tach, it's a freaking 8,000 RPM redline. I mean, it's so much fun, right? And it's exciting, and it really revs out. And of course, there's the VTEC part of it all too. So and again, the fact that this is a 5-speed manual, right? You really have to work for it, right? You go through the gears. It's a lot of fun, quite frankly. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it another rev here. First gear pull. Again, this car is really good. I think part of it is the chassis too. Is not only is it light, but it's nimble. I mean, by today's standards, I feel like the steering's a little loose. It doesn't have maybe as much of a direct connect feel like some of the modern steering systems. But again, this car is old, right? It's been around for a long time. But that aside, I mean, again, it does turn in well. We're coming up on some traffic up here, but it just feels nimble on these very, very narrow roads. And it really feels like, again, cars have just gotten so big and so complex that there's really something like pure about driving an older sport compact like this Integra GS-R. So, again, let us know your guys' thoughts and comments down below. Let us know if you want to see, more of these sport compacts on the channel. We're happy to bring it to you. We're going to go ahead and turn around here. So, all right, so here we are. We're on some pretty twisty roads. We're going to go ahead and put the Integra GS-R a little bit through its paces. But again, this car doesn't have like the crazy brakes of the Type R, doesn't have the modern rev matching. So you got to, you're working for this drive, right? Every bit of it is you just like revving this thing out and really just staying in control, right? But I mean, it does like to rev up these hills here. It really is a lot of fun. And I mean, it's like when you get to that point where like VTEC's about to kick in, it just gets so loud and raw and visceral. I think it would be really great to now, after driving a GS-R, would be going back and driving a Type R to show the delta in performance and sound and chassis tuning that went from the GS-R to Type R. So let us know your guys' thoughts and comments down below. Should we bring a vintage Type R to the channel? If you guys watched our full walkthrough of the American Honda collection haul, you remember that there was a beautiful Integra Type R in that collection. So maybe we can actually pull that out. I think that would be fantastic to now drive that, knowing that we've got the GS-R on the channel as well here too. So we're gonna go ahead and yeah, like I said, we're just waiting for traffic to clear up. But man, this car is already just bringing back a load of nostalgia. It's a lot of fun. And so with that, we're gonna go ahead and actually just do a quick blast here in first gear, and here we go. I mean, it's not super fast, but man, just listen to that engine. It is, especially once it gets up like through VTEC and it revs, and like the chassis so light and playful. And even though admittedly I said before the steering was like a little overly light, it makes sense, right? It all of a sudden just shows you like how much you can like, play with this car, right? It really shows you like what those go-kart like feelings were back in the 80s and 90s, where weight was so not an issue. Right now you have to like fight through, you feel the weight of the vehicle. This, you don't get that at all. It's so light, it's so pure. It really shows why this car helped define that sport compact segment, for sure, bar none. So we're gonna come up on another little twisty section here. So let's go ahead and do one more blast, and we'll go ahead and wrap up this drive video. All right, here we go. Shifting gears is great. The 5-speed feels good, and it's amazing that this is still the original clutch. But man, this car is a lot of fun, guys. Let us know what you guys think. We're happy to bring more cars like this to the channel. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this drive video. All right, guys, that is a wrap. What did you think of the 2000 Acura Integra GS-R? Is it truly one of the best sport compacts of all time? Was this your dream car growing up? Let us know down in the comments below. Also, let us know, do you want to see more retro cars on this channel? We're happy to bring it to you. Just let us know which make and model, and we'll do our best to get it on the channel. So again, if you've watched us before, thank you so much. But if you're new to the channel, please be sure to click that bell to subscribe to come back for more. Thanks, and we'll see you at the next episode.